Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Oliver. I'm one of the facilitators for UCBUGG, basically Berkeley's like graphics club and DeCal. Some of you I recognize are taking it right now, so hi. And I will be giving you guys a lecture on 3D modeling for your VR projects. So all of you guys should have heard from your facilitators that you need to download Maya for this. I'm going to be doing a quick demo, and I'm just going to be showing you how to navigate around Maya and some basic stuff that you can do. And then at the end of the class, we'll be going through how to model some basic assets for your projects. Okay, so I'm going to start by opening Maya. And you guys can just follow along. I would open up Maya on your computer. Don't feel like you guys need to follow along quickly. We're going to give you breaks in between what I'm doing so that you guys can mess around with the program and experiment with it a bit. But I'm just going to show you basically what we can do with this program. So this is Maya. Hopefully you guys are able to get it working. And I'm just going to explain to you guys what some of the UI elements are. So this gray area that you can see, this is our viewport. And this is where we're going to be doing most of our work and modeling stuff all in here. So the first thing that you guys need to do when you're making some asset in Maya is to go up to the Create button up here. And you're going to see there's something that says Polygon Primatives. So I'm going to select a cube, and we're going to see that we've created our basic primitive right here. So Maya lets you do a lot of operations on whatever it is that whatever primitive it is that you make. So what I have right now is the move tool, and you guys can access that by hitting W or going to the side here and clicking on this button. Oh. So this is the move button over here, and you should be able to create some sort of primitive over here, and then move it around with this tool. So as you can see, I can move everything, yeah, really basic stuff. All right. Other tools that we have in Maya are rotate, which you can access by hitting E or hitting the button right below the move tool. And we have rotation in all axes. Wonderful. Okay. And then the last basic operation that we have is scaling, which you can get to by hitting R or hitting this button. Oops. Hitting this button right below rotate. And that lets us scale our object in various axes. Okay. Oh. And right. So you guys might not be able to move your cameras. So how we do that is all of the camera operations to navigate Maya are done with the Alt key. So you hold down Alt, and then if you left click, you can rotate. If you hold down Alt and you right click, you can pan, or zoom in, zoom out. And then if you hold down Alt and you middle click, that lets us pan the view. Okay. So I'm going to stop right here, and we're going to walk around a bit. You guys can just basically play around with those things, and if anyone has trouble, raise your hand. We just want everyone to get this stuff down really quick first before we move on to more complicated stuff. Is that fine? Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far about anything that I've gone over? It's some pretty simple stuff, but it's important that you guys know these 4 tools. Yeah. I don't have a mouse wheel on my tablet, so yeah.
Alt and the mouse wheel, like clicking down the mouse wheel is like the middle. It's the same as doing the middle mouse. So that's like that's panning around your screen.
We're gonna go crazy going back and forth between all screen and
Yeah. Yeah. Literally every like 3D program has like different hotkeys. I don't know why they do that, but
Can't you change hotkeys?
you can, but then when you go and like look up tutorial videos, they're like, use this hotkey, and then you like push it, and then you're like, wait, that doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah, like we use Blender a lot, and it's a totally different system. And then yeah, it's like there's so many hotkeys that when you want to look them up to figure out how to do something, you'll be like, oh, press F, and you're like, oh wait, I changed F to something else, and then nothing works.
It's not like the alt clicking the alt button on its own doesn't change the cursor, right? It doesn't do anything until you click.
Okay. All right. So hopefully you guys have been able to mess around in your viewport for a bit. The next thing I want to show is that right now we have been operating with just like single objects, but as you can see from these lines on this mesh has lines that are the edges. We call them edges. These gray things are faces. And these points here are the vertices. And so we want to be able to manipulate our object by modifying all these things. And so how do we do that? Well, you hold down right click, and you should get this little radial menu. And you can see that we have object mode, which is what we're in right now. We have edge mode, which lets us grab these edges like so. We have vertex mode, and grab these, move them around. I have symmetry on, which is why I'm grabbing 2 at once, but you can ignore that. And then we have face mode, which lets us do this. So this is actually how most of modeling is done in Maya. It's just manipulating edges, vertices, and faces into the general shape of whatever it is that you want to model. There is another thing. So say we've created your cube, but you want more faces to work with, or you need something to like jut out of your model. So the next tool that I'm going to show you how to use is pretty much one of the most common ones used, and it's called Extrude. And so I want you all to go into face mode. I'm going to turn my symmetry off really quick. So go into face mode, and I want you to select just any face, like this one that I have here. And now we're going to go to Mesh Tools, and Edit Mesh, and we're going to click Extrude. All right, and then nothing really happens. Everything kind of looks the same. But if we grab this arrow now and we move it out, oops, what the heck happened there? Okay, try again. Extrude.
Yeah, Control E is the hotkey for extrude. So you can either go from the menu or you can hit Control E and select the face.
Okay, yep, so now that I've extruded and I've grabbed the arrow and moved it out, you can see that I've taken this face and basically popped out like another kind of cube from my mesh, if that makes sense.
How do you split up your mesh like that?
Sorry?
If you typically just have the 6, this one is 5 between the 4.
When I created my cube, so when I went into my Polygon Primitives and I created my cube, there's this little box right next to it, and if you go into there, you can actually set how many divisions your cube has.
You can edit them after too, and then actually editors.
Yeah, so mine by default had 4 on each side. Yours might have had 1 or 2. It doesn't really matter for now, but it's good to know. So let's see. And so to access that, we go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and then when I clicked Cube, I didn't click on this box here, but this box right next to it, if you click on it, gives you a bunch of options that you can click on. And the ones that you're interested in are width divisions, height divisions, and depth divisions. No. So when you create something, I'm actually going to go over that pretty soon if you need more edge loops.
Once you've edited it, like you can, when you create a cube and you haven't touched the cube, you can go into the attribute editor on the right-hand side over there, and you can change it. But once you've changed something about your cube, like you've extruded or you've messed with it in some way, then it's unable to add more divisions. Once you've changed the geometry of the shape, basically.
So has everyone gotten a grip on like moving, rotating, scaling, and extrusion? Okay, cool. Next thing I want to show is, okay, let's say I'm in object mode. And you get to that by holding right click, getting the menu, go to object mode. Now let's say I create another cube. And I want to access my objects. And let's say like one of them is, for instance, I have like 100 objects right now. And it can be annoying to just go and click on the one that you want. So another way of selecting your objects is to go to Windows, and then go down to where it says Outliner. And then this pops up a menu where you can see all primitives and objects that you created in your cube. So you have pcube1 and pcube2. And so this outliner is just how you keep yourself organized, and you should go in here and like rename stuff as you're making them. So like whatever, this is demo cube, for example.
Same thing you do with like keeping your code clean. So make sure to name all of your objects and don't just have it keep 1, keep 2, keep 3, get really lost.
Okay, and then the last thing I want to show before we take another break and let you guys experiment with the program is to show you exactly how to answer that question of how do I get more divisions into my mesh. So you've created your cube, and you've decided, well, I need more stuff to work with. I need more edges, or I need more vertices. So how do we do that? Well, we go to Mesh Tools, and there's a tool here called Insert Edge Loop. So I'm going to click on this, and now if I go into Edge mode, and I click on an edge, I can drag this like outline onto my mesh and just drop an edge loop wherever I want. So I can do that here, 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 whatever. And now I have a lot more to work with. I can grab all these verts that I just added in, and I can move them around and manipulate things. All right, so we're going to take a break. You guys just mess around with the primitives, mess around with the tools that I've shown you, and just see how they work. Right. So when you have an edge loop, pretty much every edge loop can be selected by going to edge mode. I'm selecting the edge loop by double clicking it, and that selects the whole ring. Sometimes that doesn't work, so you might have to like actually go in and select everything, but it's a pretty simple primitive, so I can do that. And then once you select the edge loop, you can hit W to go into the Move tool, and you can shift that around. I definitely don't want to move it all the way over here. It's causing some problems, but yeah. Does anyone have any questions so far?
So single clicking one edge and then going to your Move tool allows you to move one edge. If you double click an edge, it'll select everything in a ring around the object, like from the start of that edge all the way to the end of that edge. And then you can move the whole, yeah, like you said, you can move the whole edge up and down.
Mm-hmm.
The whole
Is there a good way to keep the edges exactly separated into two?
Yep. Okay, I can show you guys how to do that. So on this cube, say you want to put an edge loop exactly in the middle. So how we do that is when we go into our Insert Edge Loop tool, once again, there's this box on the right. Basically, every tool in Maya has this box to the right of it, and this like opens up the options that let you tweak that tool to better suit your needs. And so what we're going to do is go into multiple edge loops, and then I'm going to actually just have it set to 1. And now if I go into edge mode, it should place one edge loop, and it'll place that directly in the middle of whatever I'm clicking on. And we can even set this to like, I don't know, 10. We can go crazy, add 10 edge loops, or however many that you want, but it'll space all of these evenly. So how I got this is the same thing that I did when I was making my polygon and I wanted to add more divisions, is when I opened the tool, the Insert Edge Loop tool, there's this box right here. It's kind of hard to see up here, but there's a tiny box that you can click, and then that opens up your tool settings for whatever tool it is. Every tool in Maya has one of these boxes.
Another way of getting to that too is if you just put an edge loop down and you want to change your edge loop or put more down, the tool that you use last is the one that's highlighted right here. So this is your most recently used tool, that's the edge loop tool. And so if you double click that icon, that'll open up the object box. So just as if you were to double click the move tool or the rotate tool or the scale tool there to open up their option boxes, the most recently used tool is there. Open the option box that way. It's something you're commonly doing.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go back to the previous setting that I have, which was equal distance from edge. This is I don't know which the default is. I think the default is relative distance, but relative and equal distance are almost the same thing. They're slightly different, but it doesn't really matter much for what you guys are doing. So I'm going to go back to my previous setting. Now, one last thing that I want to go over before we move on to the next part of the lecture is, say you want to move your object in a very controlled manner. So I want to translate it, but I want to translate it a very specific amount. So when you have an object selected in object mode, all of its attributes will show up in this thing called the channel box over here on the right. If it's not showing up for you, this button up here in the top right corner that looks like a stack of I don't know, square pancakes, that's it. So click on that and you have all these attributes that you can manipulate here. So I'm just gonna, I don't know, scale this at 10. I'm gonna rotate it by 90 or whatever, 45. And you can see that whenever I change one of these values, it applies directly to my object. So this is if you need something to be at a really specific point in your scene. All right. Now, oh, and one more thing. So right now we've been in what we call rigid mode, but if I hit the number 3 on my keyboard, you can see that this thing is now smoothed. And when you export your model to Unity, you can actually export it as, you can export it with either smooth or rigid normals, depending on what you want for your project. Okay. And, okay, so the next part of the demo, I'm going to open up a new scene. Okay. So you want to model an asset for your Unity project. How do we do that? Well, the most commonly used method of doing it is to box model your thing based off of a reference image. So I'm going to teach you guys how to load a reference image into your scene and then how to basically trace out that model. Yeah. So I already have an image that I'm going to use. It's this sword. But I recommend that you guys all go onto Google or Pinterest or whatever it is that you want to use and find an image of a sword that you want to model. Don't spend too long on this.
Preferably a flat image, one that's looking straight
Yeah,
down on it.
something similar to this where it's just like you have a flat image of the thing that's centered to work with. It doesn't really matter. You guys can do whatever you want. You can even pick a really basic sword. It doesn't have to be crazy like this. And then I'm going to teach you how to load that into Maya. So in Maya, right now we've been looking at things in perspective, which lets you pan. But for a lot of purposes, we don't actually always want to be able to look at everything in 3 dimensions all at once. So we're actually going to start by doing this in just a 2D view. So how we do that is we're going to go to this thing that says panels at the top of your viewport right here. We're going to click on that, and then down here it says orthographic, and we're going to click on front. And that should change your view to something like this. And now I'm going to load my image into this view. So how I do that is I go into View, which is in the same, it's like all the way on the left here from Panels. I'm going to go down to where it says Image Plane, down here, and I'm going to import my image. And it's really important that you're in your orthographic view when you do this, because that tells Maya how it's going to orient the photo when it brings it in.
Where did you get that from?
Sorry?
Where did you get this?
So that is from View, down to Image Plane, and we're going to import the image.
So that's just his desktop right now.
So this brings up a menu,
For documents.
and you guys can find the picture that you downloaded of the sword, and I'm just going to click on it and load it in. And now you should see that your picture is in your viewport. Okay. We're going to take a break and try and help people get caught up to here for now.
Anyone else see how to get my sword?
Let's try to say that.
Okay, sure, I can do that. Yeah. Okay, so it looks like everyone's caught up, so I'm going to move on. So I'm actually going to scale this image up a bit so I have more to work with. And now, how am I going to model this? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a plane, and I'm going to use that plane to trace out the model and basically like copy the shape of it first. So how we do that is I'm going to go up to Create, like we made our cube, and we're going to go to Polygon Primitives, and we're going to click on Plane. All right, and when you do that, it's actually going to look like nothing happened. That's because we need to rotate our plane. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back I'm going to go back into my perspective view. So you can either do that by going back to here, clicking on perspective, and clicking on persp, which is our camera, or you can click on spacebar twice, oops, or spacebar once, sorry, and then that'll bring up like this quad view, and then you can hover over your perspective view over here and then hit space again, and then that brings me into this view. Okay, so now you can see I've made my plane, but it's like at the wrong angle, but luckily I showed you guys how to fix that earlier. So let's go into rotate X and do 90 degrees here. Okay, but then now we have another problem. Now my plane is overlapping my image plane. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click my image plane, and I'm going to go into move, and I'm going to move that all the way back. Okay, so now you guys should have a plane that is in front of our image. And once we have that, we can go back into our front view so that we can trace this thing out. So I'm going to do that by hitting spacebar, hovering over the view that I want, hitting space again. Now I'm back here, and I have this already. Okay.
So space seems to just bring up a whole bunch of no, a whole bunch of like names.
Can you click out of your thing? Yeah, no, this is. I wonder if your hotkey is set to something else. I would use
If I click it twice and hold it, then I can do this. Then, like you're showing there. But if I just press it once. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just use the panels.
Yeah, so if the hotkeys aren't working for you, then go up to panels and you can select your view from here, either in orthographic, which is our 2D view, or from perspective, which is your 3D view.
Sometimes there's an issue like if you want to switch to Object mode and edge mode using hotkeys, sometimes that's different on Mac versus PC, and sometimes our Mac is already set to something. So sometimes the hotkeys get a little messed up when you're changing manually. So yeah, if in doubt, just use the tabs or pull down.
Okay, so now that you have your plane and you have your picture that you want to trace out, how are we going to do this? So the first thing I'm going to do is go into scale, and I'm actually going to just drag this out until it's about the same length as my sword. Okay, and I'm going to make it about as thin as the handle, because I'm going to start from like the small part and then work out to the shape of the rest of it. Now, one thing that is really useful if you have a symmetrical asset like this is that we can actually work in symmetry, and basically that just says that Maya will select whatever's on the opposite side. And so I'm going to do that by going into my tool settings, and how I do that is you double click on any of these tools over here, and then it'll bring up your tool settings. And then down here, there's the symmetry settings. I'm going to set that to object X. Okay. Now, if I go into edge mode, and I select something on the left, it also highlights whatever is on the right. And so that'll just make it easy if whatever you're modeling is symmetrical. If whatever you're modeling isn't symmetrical, then just ignore all that. You don't need to do it. Yep. That's totally fine. So right now my plane actually only has like very minimal edge loops, and so it might actually be difficult for me to model this. And so basically the process of modeling something is you look at what you have, which is this plane, and you see, okay, if I want to jut out here, that means that I need to put an edge loop somewhere near this like jutting out area, so that later on I can go and grab this vertex and move it to where it needs to go. And this is actually basically how we're going to do it. So as you can see, I'm just going to be grabbing vertices and pushing them out and kind of like trying to match the shape as much as I can. And over here, you might notice I don't have enough edge loops over here to get this, to drag this over here. So I'm just going to go back into my Insert Edge Loop tool, insert edges where I need them, go back to vertex mode, grab my verts, and just keep moving stuff around. So does anyone have any questions so far about what we're doing? So to turn on Symmetry, you double click on your tools over here, and then your window should pop up like this. And then you go into your Symmetry settings over here, and you want to click Object X. So this will let you select everything that is on the opposite end of your model, as long as your model is already symmetrical. So Symmetry is double-clicking on your tools on the left, and then it'll open up this window, and then you can click on Symmetry, and then select Object X. So at this point, basically to model this whole sword, all you guys need to do is basically just use all the tools that we've gone over so far, which is either move, rotate, scale, and extrude. So if you guys look over here, or you can keep working on whatever it is that you're working on. Say I want to do this little part that kind of juts out here. I can do that by selecting an edge and then extruding out.
You can scale edges just so you can scale the object. So pull on an edge, and since you can only click on both edges on the left side and the right side, and you can scale the edge to make it shorter, you can make it longer width-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So you can also rotate that.
So I'm just manipulating my edges, extruding them. I'm doing some rotations to orient them. So I'm going to rotate this edge so that I can get this right angle that I want. And then I'm going to hit E again, or Control E, so I can extrude out. And then I can select this edge. I can extrude again. And I can just keep doing operations like this, extruding, rotating my edge, scaling it in, moving it. Then I'm going to extrude again. So it's basically just these 4 tools that I've taught you from the start of class, and then you guys just have to use them in combination with one another to, you know, get the basic shape or outline of whatever it is that you're modeling.
Why would you take that?
Yep. Okay. Yep. Sorry, what was your question?
Why would you extrude?
Um,
So I have this, right?
right.
I got a plan. I'm trying to extrude this edge like that.
So make sure that you have the edge selected.
Yeah, I got this edge selected.
You might be in face mode, or you might be in. Here, let me check. I'll come from there. Okay, so another thing to help you guys model whatever you're basing your thing on is, say that you're getting to the point where your thing is kind of covering up most of your image and you want to see what's underneath there. So you can go down to shading, which is right up here in the top left corner, and we can click on X-ray, and then that actually lets you see through your mesh so that you can trace a bit better. Or do whatever it is that you need to do.
Honestly, it's hard to like work things out something on it. It's like, okay, I can't do it now.
Okay.
I guess it's
The new construction says like it's,
like,
I don't know.
well, first,
Do you think they would like
scale it.
flip a breaker?
So you should. I'm trying to make it happen again.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to use this at everything here, like so here.
Okay, you know what it is? So it's interesting. So one better way of doing this, like because I would drag these guys back in the W. Do you not? Oh, you don't have symmetry turn on.
I thought I did. I was doing it the whole time before.
Oh no. Okay.
I feel like I have like a million things possible things.
God,
And
okay,
no one
no,
would ever have
here's the like
possible
magical
solutions.
sauce. Last time we were none of my legs were possible.
Yeah.
What's this?
This thing is like selecting right? You press
I've never realized the last one. Okay, so if you do that, like, do you want to keep even on top of it, like, you want to have most of your edges going straight down.
So you want to just add.
So yeah, you want to
I've been having some.
you want to include these guys here. Leave. This is the last one. It's not. So we're gonna do.
So that's because
So now we're gonna go to Extrude. It just changes. That's why it was so
How we can do that.
So now you're gonna control the Extrude.
Yes, so
Yeah.
Okay, so we want to move
Yeah, so you do it that way.
so
And then you
maybe
can like
instead
go back
of using
to
yeah, so you can select specific edges and then extrude that.
because that way like
The
you
cool
can
thing
like
is
essentially like one
that you can
image.
try to
Yeah, it just wait, and especially if it has an object that you're animating, it's good to scratch like straight lots of straight lines. They then easier to
So,
like triangle.
So let's say I think
So,
when I start this thing, I would
Yeah.
like and I want to bind them into a single loop.
then the way you do that is like shift, select, and then select those connections.
It's like select, you just like select the dot, right?
Oh, yeah. So just like those jabs, those down. But
And then the other piece is there a way to quickly round it?
It's like this was a cute
So
but
like
we always
here,
route
where
the maps
you
if you
want
by accident.
round this to the radius.
No, it's just these. It's just so odd. It's like
Oh, yeah, also that's like get crazy and crash last time. Yeah. So, I mean, let's just save before you do that.
Mine's like literally.
no, it's so fine. Cool. So I don't know why it just responds to anything, and now you should be able to.
It's also really
Honestly, yeah, it's just like so many years of different applications.
Actually, the round is like it's like firebreak mode and this new round.
Yeah, you can always also extrude if you want to keep the horizontal line down.
Oh, yeah, so, this is just some setting. What is it? Maybe it's like back to that original right click thing that we learned last week.
And it opens up a wheel.
Yeah,
That's
it's gone.
always been fun to use because sometimes it just does that.
So it's a lot of just.
I was a lot more edge movement because when you move this up,
So I did was I grabbed the middle off and I just kind of walk around the middle thing.
Yeah.
so everything's like a 90 degree.
There's like gonna be 10 polygons over the whole thing.
It's okay, it's VR, right?
Yeah.
Low poly.
I'll just call it part of your artistic business.
Yeah, you tell your design team that's the what you're going for.
Like that. Okay, now
Mine is just
Okay, I want to show one thing that's really useful to help you guys with your modeling. So say you're trying to manipulate a bunch of vertices, and say it's really annoying to click through all the vertices that you want to manipulate because you just have a ton in your model. And that's totally fine. It's very common. But what I'm going to teach you how to do is how to soft select. So right now we've just been selecting things manually one at a time. But if you hit, so like say you want to manipulate this vertex along with everything else around it, what you can do is select this vertex, you can hit B on your keyboard, and then that should show like a bunch of things in yellow. And basically what that did is that now that all these things are yellow, it's saying that I'm selecting this one vertex and like everything around it that's yellow. And so now if I move this, it should move everything around it.
if you pull down, what is it to adjust the
And so let's say that the radius that you have by default is either too big or it's too small. What you do is you hold down the B button and you click and you drag, and you should see this little circle thing. And then this,
radius of all the vertices that you're going to select.
yep, and so you can see that I can select like almost the entire model, and then how it works is that the farther away we get from this circle, the less points that we're, or the farther you get away from the circle, the less influence the soft select has on it. So say that you want to make the top of your sword pointy or something. Well, what you can do is like if this was flat like this or something and you want to bring it up so it's pointy, you can go hit soft select and then just drag up, and you can see that it's kind of pulling everything up, but it's pulling the middle up way more than it's pulling up the sides. And you can adjust that by changing how big your fall off radius is. You do that by holding B and clicking and dragging. Another option to do this is in your tool settings, which I showed you how to open before, which is double clicking the tool. If that doesn't work, it's because you already have it open. And then down here, there's another thing above your symmetry settings called soft selection. And that lets you adjust the fall off radius manually if you don't want to use the B and clicking thing.
Also, I think it's especially helpful in the cases of like organic modeling. Like, let's say you're making an environment, you want hills, or you're making like some sort of animal, and you want to add, you know, bumps or horns or something. That works really well to like pull a whole bunch of like a blob of vertices up rather than like one by one, super sharp and pointy.
Okay, so we're going to keep walking around, and hopefully you guys can catch up to here.
Yeah.
First question is, when I do this. Okay, so the next question is, I want to put like an entry like going this way, so that where the square here's like a folder. So when I do, it might have that across.
So actually, the best way to get this or if you drag this
So,
Drag this.
and these days you could, but generally when you use mine, you really want to keep everything into
Well,
squares.
I haven't
You
gotten
always
this
want
right.
to have
So I only did this.
squares with more or less 90
So
degree
I'll actually
angles.
drag
And then extend this.
yeah, so
So-
you can either extend that out
Can be points
or
of
you
space
can
that like you need to be connected
there's
to
a
at
bunch of
least
ways. Basically
4 other
extrude this
Otherwise, yeah, the object will
So
pretty
you
much
just
be like a flat mesh. It'll be like there'll be holes in it.
and then you can
So where do you make your
control that.
oh, it's fine, yeah.
And then you have to now those are
Yeah, so there's one way you can start with a flat one like this, and then you can split everything on the plane and extrude it, and that will have like a pretty
So I want to move just
um,
the center here.
if you were to split all of these in your plane and just do one out, then you
so
got
what
3
we'll
objects.
do is
Another way is to
this
plot small things
when we want to
where you already start with 3 objects, and then you're adding both this and once on the bottom with all 4 going down. That's just a lot easier than stuff. Yeah, so some of the so essentially a way to fix that is you go to Extrude, which is oh, that's okay, so that's math expertise settings. All your faces. Then you go to mesh display. It's older normal, so you go to the black means it's the back somehow, and then the gray is the front. So that's why you can go to perspective mode and you like rotate around it on one side. So one side. Oh, you're in. Yeah, the back side or both sides that is blocked, and then the side that you've been working on. That's so that's exactly what you're tracing.
You know, instead of adding edges, can we just add individual vertexes?
Where do you guys?
So, like, I'm looking at my volume here, right?
Yes.
And I want to add extra vertices here and here. Is there any way to do that to add a whole edge loop? Because then I want to come back in.
so sometimes you need
Yeah, so in general, you want to have each point or vertex touching, you want space here, quadrilateral shapes. And so it's not actually too big of a deal to add edge loops. You actually want them, if you do add an edge, you want to continue all the way around your model. It's not too bad to do that. So that's what I'm doing here. Yeah, that's how it's where you're at. Yeah, start one right there and have it go vertically around.
So,
Okay, so that's the middle one.
no problem.
Yeah, that's all.
So, just put that somewhere in here, just where.
Just like right there, maybe. And then if you go to vertex mode, yeah, you can grab that one and just put it. Oh wait, yeah. No, just control Z until you're sure you haven't made any extra.
Okay. All right. Okay, the next thing I want to show you guys, if we can just direct attention to the front again. So let's. So let's say that you have your thing basically blocked out. You have the shape. I didn't completely finish, but it's fine because I'm not sure if everyone has. But say you have your shape basically blocked out. It's traced out. It looks exactly the way you want it. But then we realize that our thing is still 2D. And that's bad because you want your mesh to be 3D when you bring it into Unity. So how we're going to fix this is we're going to select the entire plane, and we're going to go into object mode. We're going to select the whole plane that you just made. And what we're going to do is we're going to do what you guys did with the extrusion. And we're going to do Control E. And then, that's weird. Control E.
You hold, right click, hold it, and then remove this spiral thing.
Object mode. Yeah. So we're going to grab the whole thing. We're going to extrude. And then, it's not working. Control E. Okay. And then drag out this thing. Local translate Z. And so what that'll do is it gives your plane thickness so that now your sword is a 3D object. So what I did again was I selected my object with object mode. I hit Control E, and then I went into this local translate Z thing that it says, and I put in like whatever, 1. And there we go. You have your object. And so now that you have a 3D mesh to work with, now we actually want to go and shape it in 3D. And that's still the same principles that you guys have been learning, which is going into your edge loops tool, and just inserting stuff into the mesh, like so. And I can make my sword like sharp by kind of like scaling this out. Oops, there we go. Wait, that's not working. Just moving stuff around, scaling it in. And I'm just still manipulating vertices and edges. Like so. So now the 2D image is something that we can port into Unity. So areas like this, like the hilt that I want to have more dimension, I'm going to select the faces like so. And I'm just going to hit Control E, drag this out. So now, like, this sword is more three-dimensional. And so this is still all using the 4 tools, just move, rotate, extrude, and scale. So grabbing faces, extruding. And another thing that might help you guys at this part is if you don't want to select both sides again, you can go back into your tool settings and you can turn symmetry on in Object Z. unfortunately, we can only do one axis at a time. But now, if I select the front faces, you should see that, oh no. Well, ideally, we should be able to select both sides. I might have chosen the wrong axis. Let's try Y. Okay, so somewhere along the line, my symmetry got broken, so that's why this isn't working, which isn't a big deal. We can just keep selecting things normally, but if your object is perfectly symmetrical, you should still be able to go into the symmetry options and manipulate stuff like that.
For some reason, I can create potentially over here, but not over here. Okay. So I'm sure it's starting to see zero. Oh yeah, we were trying to smooth and unsmooth. How do you unsmooth? I think it is.
I can just say it at all.
Okay, so the issue thing.
How do you save this? It's like, I know you just like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah, so the problem is that now that you can use the edges, now we have a quad here. Now this is a 1, 2, 3, 4. And so now that it's not a line, it's so into it. So that's one of the reasons why. So as a general,
Yeah, unless you know like what I'm doing, and you know that if I delete this hash,
I just like your thing.
so what you can do is you can actually go and delete the vertices that are causing the issue, and if, as long as you turn that back onto a quad, then you should be able to add your groups back. Yep.
sorry, on the bridge, you the symmetry.
Right. So you want to double click on your tool on the side. Yep. And that opens up your tool settings, and then that has symmetry down. Alright. Thank you. Turn that off.
You're still not able to. So,
Okay, so use it. What's stuff like that?
So you can do the high levels.
That's weird. That's right here. And just like mess with the sphere until just put the sphere on your fillet so you don't have to like do this crap. I want to be like clipping inside or something. But it doesn't matter because they can't see.
so
That's true, I guess. So yeah, so you can actually see what's wrong then. It's not. It's up. Yeah. I don't know.
So I do it. So yeah. Now you can go up into display. And you can click on reverse.
This is like the other one.
So I think the issue was I would try and control Z back to before you extrude. Yeah.
Drop that sphere there. Just drop the sphere there. Just drop
Is
the
there a
sphere.
way to just
After you've made it. Yeah.
I managed to work on it. I also hit something by accidentally right clicking, either in the menu or over here, and now it's getting this weird like. So yeah, it just undoes the thing before that.
Continuously.
No, but like it goes back to before I made it. I think it's just a display change, but not an action.
Oh, you only have like
Well, like I made this split edge, right, and then I changed the display, so it controls the entire. So
So we can, what we can do is we can go into object.
No. So like I had it as a standard collection. I had it as a standard collection of edges, right? But I hit something up here. I think something that has to do with display, and all of the edges, instead of having like lines, basically have an outline of this plane, and it turned into this weird kind of like crosshatch, like it split everything apart from the edges I had. Yeah, I think it's just a display change. So I hit something accidentally, and now it's giving me this instead of trying to regulate.
So let's
Control right on it.
This is actually just, so this is just another way.
Yeah.
So there's edges, face, and this is UV face.
Yeah, that's
So just so
that.
I'm just looking at like face positive order.
Oh,
So
right.
Yeah, so what happened was that I was using the vertex space.
The course over here.
Yeah, so that's just something that I've been using for you never really test that.
Curious.
Like this is once it's selected,
Yes.
Yeah, so the problem with doing that is like sometimes seems like that photo, and so like this is really
I just accept the and then start working.
it's actually better to have it on edges. Like I did that instead of on there. It's like this, but now
It's straight up and
basically my hair is like that thing instead of four sides of this. It's not
so like I want to make it
right here. It's like at the ball side.
I think it's the same problem.
I think you initially do that on
Yeah.
so
Like how can not like this? It's like the same thing. Like the way you this is like
So when you add it, it requires what you're adding to be a block. And right now this is a So what happened was that you had an here before, and I'm thinking that they delete them. And then you delete edges, you actually really hard for one. So so make sure that whatever's left behind is still on. So this is like a so I'm thinking if you go and you actually in the executed this, right? You had edges here before. So the problem, you can't add edges if this is a not a lot. You can only add edges if this is a 1, 2, 3. I don't know how many What I would do is you can go into your mesh tools. Essentially lets you probably say your loops are going to go along your typically what it will matter later, or if you were to decision to program, this would still the processing of it. But since you just want to I would be really careful in your assignment to not to actually just leave edges that you are creating. You should only
Sometimes what I would think is,
a lot of it say you did it, and then
Oh my gosh, I'm back to the now that
and then you
best of
realize later, oh,
but that's because
make sure that when you leave your
pulling all of
you go back
Right
and
on here,
select
you have
all the proceeds that were there, and you delete them on that one. That's it.
That's because all of these things are
sometimes you can just select all the things and delete, and then sometimes you just get rid of the ones that are okay. Yeah, these ones are some of the solutions.
Also, it's going to be really hard for you to actually get this perfectly because it doesn't seem like you're able to see.
I just put two in. So I just moved it to the left side.
Right, right. But I'm saying it seems like this on the left side has a bullet step.
Yeah.
But
Is there any way to make all this like this cool? I want to just really
So-
click on this. So maybe
It's not really
because it's gonna mess it up.
yeah, the problem is that when you do this, you have to make sure that like your space, like all the areas.
Okay, but if I do here,
and then it's just like so sometimes
that's what I'm.
The problem is just like so I think what I would do is
it's no one's gonna go, yeah, this is like
I would actually click here.
Okay, I forget what it is.
so he extruded the optical.
So you go to your different
And like close off.
So what you want to do is you want to select that object.
And then you should end up with boxes.
How do I turn it around?
There we go.
Okay.
So now, is that object? So we have to
Oh my gosh, how do you control this?
so you want to pop out as soon as possible.
How do I turn it?
Oh, you pop out. Okay, so now we
Well, make it so that so basically they're not like like bring them together.
okay, so you could do this.
Not that I'm all the outside. They're really good at
Yeah, so you kind of like eyeball it,
Yeah.
but basically you could select
Select just like the
So now, if you do on both sides, you work on first.
And how do you go?
yeah, for some reason just the bottom of the sword they got
Yeah, like
So it's gonna be kind of jank in that you're not gonna have a dead center. But this is
close.
So I will let you actually grab the edges around. That's fine. I would click on that one. Now you can either grab this edge and go out, or you can grab this.
Oh, no, I haven't. Here I can touch one side.
this size.
Yeah. Can you get out of it? Undoing what?
Count one.
Yeah.
Well, I want to the right side.
No, it was like that. Or yeah, just when I like extrude or something. It's not messed up.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's good.
Is there a way to get the like coordinates over time?
Like, but like the last one, it's quite possible.
Yeah, so I tend to start with so many things that I don't want. Either has 0 dimensions on it and select, or I add in my own.
Yeah, you can
Right. So you actually, yeah, you want to start out with like the middle amount that you need, and then as you're going, you realize that I need one here to add more detail, and you add in that single edge manually. Start. Right. Yeah. Is there anything else I need to do? Check out again.
Can I select all of the vertices
Oh, there we go.
top layer and all the same height basically? It got for some reason bent.
What I would do is grab all the faces that are on top, and then scale it, and then like scale it towards how you want it to be. So like if you want it to be flat, right, you want to scale it down in that direction, and then it'll flatten out all those faces.
Oh,
I can show you really quickly after
okay, wait.
after this. I'll show you really quickly after this. Okay, let's put a pause on whatever you're working on right now. One last thing to show you is you have your 3D model. Say you've done everything, it's the right shape that you want. The last thing we're going to do is to get it into Unity is we're just going to have to export it. So what we do is we're going to select the entire object in object mode. Then we're going to go to File, and then we're going to export all. We're just going to export the selection since I don't want to export out the image that's in my scene. But if you were to click Export All, then it would actually give you every single object that you've created. But if you just want to do the sword, then I'm just going to do Export Selected. And then I'm going to actually click on the option box. And then when I click on that little option box, it should pull up this options thing. And what you want to do is click on FBX Export. And then now you should just be able to export your selection. It'll bring up this thing, and you can just save it to wherever. And then now give it a name, demo sword. Hit enter, and then now you have an FBX file that you can actually use in your Unity scene. That's basically it. I didn't go over how to like color in your model or how to animate it because that's like way too much to go over in one lecture. And as you can tell, just modeling is already really hard. So if you want to learn more about how to like, actually make your assets like have color and how to animate them and stuff, you guys can take UCBUGG because we spend the whole pretty much the whole semester teaching how to do that.